YouTube, how we doing? Right, today in this video, we're going to go through a full trade recap of a trade I took on Friday, the 5th of November. It was a short on euro dollar, as you can see here, for a total R of just over 23R. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, of course, on the higher time frames and work our way down. Kind of my goal with this video really is just to kind of, just talk you through my exact thought process of kind of, well, starting from the start of that week's price action really. Although I took the trade on the Friday, the one that I want us to go through. In fact, let's use a little bit of bar replay as well. I think it will be useful for you guys to see my thought process of kind of how, price action develops through the week, how I'm building trade ideas around that, where I want to get involved, where I want to target, etc., etc. So I tell you what, we'll actually start with the weekly time frame now. Although, the 4 hour and the M15, they are my primary time frames for looking at market structure, I do also, have a good glance at the weekly and the daily chart just to give me that overall longer term higher time frame perspective, right? So very quickly, weekly chart, we can clearly see with the sort of more recent price action, price is making a series of higher highs and higher lows, okay? We then came up to the supply level at the top of the monthly range. Then we pull back down into weekly demand in this level here. We tried to make a higher low, right? We tried to make a higher high. If I just clear this all up, price then failed to make a higher high because it failed to break and close above the most recent high. So then as we started to come down and break structure to the downside on the lower time frames, that's when we could then start to target this week low. Why is it a weekly low? It's weak because it failed to do its job. It failed to take out the weekly high, right? So then price came down, it took out that week low, but then eventually it took out this weekly low as well. Now this was a strong weekly low because it did do its job, right? It took out that high to make a higher high, but of course, eventually those strong lows are going to get taken out when we inevitably get a trend change. So at that point back, when was that? 27th of September, 2021, we then broke and closed below that weekly low to now form a lower low. So now for me, the weekly is playing within this range here, okay? So this is my swing high. Why is that my swing high? Because it's the highest point before the low was broken, okay? This was the swing low. We look back, this was the highest point. So now that is my weekly swing high. This is the swing range we're playing within. The weekly chart would have to come all the way up and break above that weekly level, right, for us to switch bullish. But anyway, in terms of this trade, we just got a weekly break of structure. So what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect to pull back on that time frame, right? So we can start to think about that potentially the weekly may pull back, right? Obviously, we don't know exactly when, but we can start to use confluence to gather that in. Now, coming into the week of the trade that I was looking at, right? If we actually look at the prior buy to sell range here in the weekly chart, right? We had essentially that buy to sell is where we have a larger range of weekly supply coming into the market, and we can see that price had just tapped into the bottom of that range and had started to see some sensitivity to that supply and had started to sell off. Now, if we look at the daily chart, very, very simple price action, right? Nice, clean, bearish trending market, series of lower lows and lower highs. So at this point, we are playing within this daily range here, okay? Now, I'm just going to delete these lines and draw on my most recent bit of daily structure here. So this was the daily swing low that got taken out, okay? So we had a daily break of structure here. Now, like I was saying, what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect a pullback. How can we know when that pullback is likely to start? If you've been watching the previous videos on market structure series, I'll link that up somewhere up here. You guys can go check that out if you haven't seen that already. You will know that I look for a change of character, right? To signal that the pullback is likely to be starting. So once we get that break of structure here, we have this down move, right? Price pulls back. It continues that bearish minor structure. Then we pull back. Then we take that low, which means we now have a high here, right? Like a minor high. Price then comes up and takes that high. So now we have that daily change of character, okay? So price comes up here and takes out that daily high, just to signify that the daily may be pulling back, okay? So this is the swing range, but now price is pulling back within this range. So if we're trying to catch that pro trend move, right, we want to basically get short and catch that daily lower high, right? So then we can target the weak daily low. How do we know when that daily pullback may be finished? Well, one of the things that we know we use is a change of character, right? So we've had a bullish change of character to tell us that the pullback's starting, and then we can look for a bearish change of character to tell us that the pullback's over, okay? So at the moment, this low would have to go for me to get a bearish change of character, okay? Because this is all part of the up move. Now we've pulled back. So at this point, this would be the change of character, or that low that would need to see go for us to have that. What can we also use? We can also use supply and demand. So if we kind of just follow the money here, we can see that demand clearly stepped into, whoops, wrong tool. If we get my daily box, there we go. We can clearly see that demand stepped into the market here, okay, to push price to the upside and take out these highs here. Price has come back in, reacted, and then this is where, this is where supply stepped into the market to overpower that demand, okay? Supply stepped in, overpower that demand, and this becomes a decent area to combine, right, with my market structure to potentially look for a lower high to form. So if I play price forward just a couple of days coming into the week's price action, okay, so now we've tapped into our supply zone, right? We can clearly see massive orders have now been filled. And what do we have? We now have our bearish change of character. So we have supply being hit, we have our low being taken. So now that signifies the pullback's over. We've mitigated a decent area of supply. Potentially now the daily lower high is in place. And now we can target that weak daily low to continue the overall bearish trend, okay? So now we can drop down to the 4-hour chart and start to build up potential trade ideas. So you can see here on the 4-hour chart, I just mark out our most recent break of structure. So price was bullish on the 4-hour chart. Why was it bullish? Well, not always, but most likely for the daily to pull back, right? The 4-hour is most likely going to be bullish, okay? Now we came into that daily supply. We have some refined 4-hour supply there as well, but I'm not going to draw that on just for the sake of this video. We then broke structure to the downside, taking out the higher low to form a lower low. So now what do we have? That daily change of character there was what? It was the 4-hour break of structure. You guys will know that if you've seen the most recent video on market structure, okay? So now the daily lower high, it's had the change of character, it's rejected supply, it looks like it's in form. The 4-hour chart has now switched bearish. So now the 4-hour chart is in line with both the daily and the weekly trend. Okay, we've had a 4-hour break of structure. So what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect a pullback. So now we can look for price to pull back, and then we can try and catch that 4-hour lower high, wherever it may form. And then we can look to target what? Target that weak daily low being run. So you can see now how I'm starting to build that trade idea. We now have the 4-hour synced. Let's wait for the pullback, try and catch that 4-hour lower high, and then we can ride that down. So where may that lower high pull back into? We can look at a few areas of supply. I'll mark out the kind of nearest POI that I can see on the 4-hour chart. All right, and now we can play this forward a little bit and then look for price to come back into our level. Or, you know, price doesn't have to hit our supply zone, right? Okay, it doesn't have to do that. It can start to break structure to the downside, right? And then we can take a message from the market and potentially realize that that lower high may be forming before our POI is hit, and we can look to get involved, you know, if we see the necessary confluence that we need to see. So let's take a look at what's happening. Okay, so we haven't hit our supply. You know, we're starting to see a bit of sensitivity to the downside, but haven't really seen anything noteworthy yet. Are we going to tap into it? We're sweeping the liquidity that's built behind that high. Okay, so now we have a minor break of structure. Okay, you can see how this is still the swing trend that we are within. Okay, so that's the lower, that's the high, and this is the lower low. Price has pulled back. It's taken the swept the liquidity that has built behind this high here, and it's now broke that minor low to the downside, right? So this is a section of price action, a section of structure, minor structure. Price has now broken that to the downside. So that's a pretty good sign that potentially now the 4-hour lower high is in place. So now what we can do is start to look on the lower time frames to get even more confirmation to now target the weak 4-hour low and target the weak daily low, okay? So this is on the 4th of November, so this is the Thursday. So let's just put this forward a little bit and see what happens. Okay, well, price has now taken, or wicked, I should say, the 4-hour low. But remember, for me to see a true break of structure, to confirm that we have that swing lower low formed, a new lower low formed, I need to see a candle closure below, right? Just so that it's not a liquidity grab. I need to see a true candle closure. And as you can see, if I draw that swing, the line across from that swing low, we can see we just wicked it. We never closed below, okay? So going into, so this is kind of, I put it forward again, right? This is around, yeah, so coming into 9 p.m. London time. So that's just before the daily market close. So at this point, kind of doing my analysis before I go to sleep, ready for the next day coming into Friday. What I will have noticed is obviously the 4 hours bearish. It looks like the lower high has formed. However, price has failed to close below the low at this point. But if we drop down to the 15-minute chart, how does that look? Well, if we look on the 15-minute chart, we can see that this is clearly bearish. We did get a solid close below. So if I kind of just map go back a little bit and we can map the highs and lows at this point. So the M15 was bullish as well, and then it came down, and then we switched bearish. Then we had a swing pullback, right? That for me is a substantial pullback for the 15-minute chart on euro dollar, and then we get another break of structure here. Just get my right templates in. So now what we have at this point is the 4 hours bearish, the daily's bearish, the weekly's bearish, the M15 is now clearly bearish. We got a decent close below, and now for me the M15, this is the swing high, and this is the swing low. Okay, so what I'm going to now do is fast forward price action to Friday morning, just before the market opened, just before London opened and Frankfurt. I usually get to my desk around 6 a.m. So let's bring it to around there, and I can talk you through my thought process for this trade. So like I was saying, we're playing within the swing range. I'm expecting the daily low to go, target that week daily low, target that week 4 hour low, and obviously target this week M15 low. Why are all of those lows weak? They're weak because they have failed to do their job. They have failed to make higher highs. So whilst the trend is bearish, where is the easy trend? The easy trend is to target those weak lows. The easy trade, I should say, is to target those weak lows. Trade with the trend, right? Don't fight it, and look to catch those lower highs. So coming into, what time is this now? 6 a.m. Coming to my desk, well, what am I thinking? Well, obviously looking for the shorts for the reasons that I just explained. So let's look at some areas of supply where potentially we can catch that short position. So if you kind of just follow the money, right? Now there's supply and demand zones everywhere in the market. Photon members will know we have two main ways for validating strong areas of demand and supply. I won't dive into those details too much just yet, as it wouldn't be too fair on the members, but there we go. So just following the money here, where are the orders exchanging hands? Follow the story here. You can see who's in control, right? Where was demand in control? Was this a strong zone in the first place? If we know how to validate that, then we know that when supply comes in, reacts from it and then takes that out, we can start to see where supply stepped into the market, follow the mitigations, follow the money, right? And we can now see, looking at that last mitigation, if price were to come into the extremity of this M15 zone, up into nice premium prices, this is where a really good area, right, which we can start to look for shorts. Now, you could just trade the zone directly, but I like to wait for a little bit more confirmation and to get my stop loss, as you can see, a little bit tighter to increase that risk reward, right, by jumping down into the M1 timeframe, okay? Now, what else do we notice? Well, we've had, and this is often what typically happens during the Asian session, where price tends to correct around and be quite slow as there's not a lot of volume, is we tend to build a range during Asia. Now, what usually builds on either side of that range? Well, anyone who's long from this double bottom, where do you think their stop loss is going to be? It's going to be below the bottom of this range, okay? So there's going to be tons of sell stops below these low. Anyone who is short from the double top, where do you think their stop loss is going to be? Just above that range, right? So either side of that range. On the top, there's going to be tons of buy side liquidity. There's going to be tons of buy stops up there. Down at the bottom, there's going to be tons of sell stops from anyone who's long. But who else is also going to have sell stops below the bottom of this range? There's going to be all of those people who are looking to trade the breakout. Okay, so they will have their sell order. It's getting a bit messy now. Delete these all out of the way. But people will look to trade the breakouts. If they see those lows go right, they will also sell. So just adds to the sell stops being there. Likewise, if they see the top of the range breakout, traders think if these highs go, we're going to go to the moon, and they'll have their buy stops there. Okay, so this is really good confluence. I don't want to get too bogged down in liquidity just now, but when I see that happening below a point of interest that I want to get involved, seeing that manipulation, that provides really, really good confluence to an area of value that you may be looking to trade into. Reason why, super quick, simple reason would be that if we're following the big money that stepped into the market, right? We're looking at their footprints, seeing those big orders. Where has the overwhelming imbalances between supply and demand occurred? We can clearly see here so far. Well, if there's liquidity, buy stops below that area of value. If there's large supply coming in, what does that supply need in order to facilitate their transaction? Okay. For every buy order in the market, there must be an equivalent sell order, right? Otherwise, no trade can take place. So if there's a lot of supply interest in this area, but there's also tons of buy stop orders here from the people who are short and from the people who are looking to buy that breakout, now there's tons of liquidity to be used for those large sellers stepping in to use those buy orders to match their sell orders, so there isn't too much slippage for them. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down into liquidity just now. Essentially, this is, hopefully you can see why this is an area that I'm looking to catch that M15 lower high, to target that weak M15 4 hour and daily low to catch that next trend continuation. So at this point, my alert's gone off, price has come down into my M15 POI. Now, I'm not going to talk through my M1 entry model. It wouldn't be fair to the Photon members, but they know exactly the exact mechanical process, the same pattern that we look for again and again and again, literally day in, day out, both on the New York session. It's the exact same thing we look for. So at this point, as you can see here, I targeted this substructure low here for 12.12R, where I took the majority of the volume off my trade. Now, there's a few reasons for this. The main reason being it was a Friday, NFP was coming up. What time was this? Yeah, just towards the end of the London session. Had a good week. 12R is, I don't care who you are, 12R is an insane trade by anyone's standards, especially when you are trading a decent amount of capital, right? Pay yourself, have a good week. I'm not here to try and make, 300R in a trade. Yes, you can do this, but you just don't need to. You need to look for consistency, bank those regular returns, keep your account compounding. So yeah, pay myself. If NFP comes out and the price spikes up and stops me out, I'm going to feel like a mug, right? So took the majority of my volume off there. Now, there was still a high probability that those daily lows were going to go, right? We were so near the low at that point, but like I said, there's no point in me risking it. So I left 10% of my volume on just to see how NFP would play out, right? Targeting, this is that main daily low, right? To see if we could get that taken out. So if we just let price fast forward a little bit, you can see that eventually price did spike down during the news. And then during that news candle, usually you see the move retrace right a lot of the time. So the moment, we got that, I just manually exited for just over 23R. So hopefully I'll flash that up on the screen so you can see I'm not talking out my ass. But yeah, so I just do, again, want to reiterate, full disclosure, like I said, I did not hold my full volume all the way down to that 23R trade, right? 90% of my volume was banked around that 12R mark, and then I just left that 10% run out and got out for 23R there. So yeah, that wraps it up. Hopefully you guys can kind of see, again, it's a little bit rushed. It's not as detailed as I'd like to go through, but kind of just wanted to give you a quick trade recap, really just building that trade analysis and the idea from the top down, weekly, daily, all bearish, right? We're looking for that trend to continue. We waited for the 4 hour to switch bearish to realign itself with the daily trend, because remember, if I just bring it back to the daily chart, give you a super quick recap now, the daily chart was bearish. We had a break of structure, right? We were pulling back into our area of supply. We then got our daily change of character to the downside, signaling, right, that the daily lower high is now in place. Now we can target this week daily low. What is that daily change of character? Most likely going to be on the 4 hour time frame. That daily change of character here, if I zoom in, was a break of structure. So at this point, this is where the 4 hour then switches bearish. So now what do? We don't jump in short straight away. We wait for the 4 hour to pull back to an area of value. Okay, then the 4 hour broke structure to the downside, giving us a good indication that 4 hour pullback was now over. And we can start to target the 4 hour low and ultimately that week daily low, okay? Now, on the Thursday, it did try to breach that low, but it failed to do so. It failed to close below the low. So it was a little bit messy at this point, right? It's not ideal, but coming into Friday, we can still target and try and get that actually true break of structure where price did finally close down. So that's where we jump down to the 15-minute and we work out what range are we playing within the 15-minute, okay? So remember, for me, the 4 hour and the M15 are my two main time frames for mapping structure, knowing where my swing high is, where is my swing low on each of those time frames. Then you know what two ranges you're in. I'm in this 4 hour range, right? This bearish range. It's obviously going to be larger to the M15. Then I'm within the M15 range. Okay, as price is coming up towards the extremity of that M15 range. So this is my swing high and this is my swing low. That orange box is the range I'm talking about for the M15. We've built liquidity during Asia, okay? We have our nice POI that we're looking at. We're building the story. We're following where the money has been in the market. We're following those series of mitigations, okay, where those orders are being exchanged. We now have liquidity swept into our POI. We have liquidity to target, right, to fuel that move to the downside. We have weak structure. That's how we're building this mechanical trade idea. It's the same thing I do every single day, every single session, this thought process that I go through. Set my alert, wait for price to come into there, drop down to the lower time frames just for that little bit of extra confirmation, just to boost your strike rate. Because of course, right, there was no guarantee that that 15-minute had to form that lower high there and stayed bearish. It easily could have, especially after we had that sweep of liquidity, quite a sharp V-trace retracement. Price could have easily come up, broken that high, switched bullish temporarily on the 15-minute chart, just to come up and mitigate, right, that 4 hour area of supply, and then we could have taken the low, okay? So there was no guarantee at that point. So I just wanted to wait for a little bit more confirmation to see if that POI was going to hold. And then that's where I got my M1 entry model. Exact same thing that I look for every single time. Tick those mechanical criteria off the box checklist. That way you have zero hesitation. When your entry model sets up, hit it, execute it, leave the trade alone, manage it following your rules, and then it playing out. Targeted to that low just below the where around that liquidity was for taking off the majority of my volume at around 12R, and then ended up banking the rest for 23R. I want to enjoy my weekend, so hopefully you guys took some value from that. Now, if you want to come and learn exactly how I do this, of course, I do have my own course here, mentorship program, the Zero to Funding course. If you know absolutely nothing about FX, it's all within here, literally from the A to Z, all the way down to the more advanced stuff. You guys have probably seen this before, right? Everything's in here that you need. I kind of do this in a really dynamic teaching method where essentially I'll go through some theory, you'll learn that concept, I'll then apply that concept to the charts. I'll then give you an exercise to go take away and apply that. And then in the next video, you can watch my walkthrough and compare your analysis to that. We also have the Photon service where I do my weekly market commentaries. I go through all of the trades from the previous week, break those down in depth, go through that really, really slowly, and then look at for our outlooks for the week ahead on the main pairs that we look at and trade. And then, of course, we also have the trading floor on Discord where I answer any of your questions. Everyone shares their markups in there. I post my analysis every single day before each session, and I do my full markups as well, where I show you all the trading opportunities, break those down in depth as well. So if you're interested in joining, if you want to get involved and really level up your trading, I'd love to work with you. We have a really small, tight-knit community. We get your answers, questions pretty quickly. I'd love to have you inside. Anyway, I hope you guys took some value from that. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Really, really helps me to get this out and get more reach, and obviously can provide more content to you. I do have one last question to ask you. If there's any content you would like to see, just drop a comment below, and I would love to kind of try and get that out to you guys. So just give me some ideas and I'll be more than happy to do that. Peace out.